Welcome to Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women, the podcast that guides professionals to financial prosperity. Join our community and let's start building your wealth. Here's your host, Gary Wilson.
Hi, everyone. This is Gary Wilson, and welcome to this week's podcast version of Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. Welcome aboard if you're new. Chances are you're a dental practitioner owning your own practice, a chiropractor, an engineer owning your own firm. We've even got policemen, firemen, teachers, even pilots, even military. But for the most part, chances are you're professional in your field and you do have an interest in real estate investing. It's just we don't do the no money down stuff. That's not what this is. It has its place. It's just not part of this. In any case, we do invest responsibly and ethically in our neighborhoods that we around where we live. We don't have to live in them, but we want to be proud of them. We lift up the community, and therefore everybody wins. The tenants win, the neighbors win, and we win as investors. Now, if you have not yet subscribed to the podcast, feel free to go to iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher. There's 75 different platforms. If you like the idea of being in the community of professionals and business owners who also like to invest in real estate, by the way, speaking of that community, you can join that too if you like. Just go to myinvestmentservices.com and you'll see there's a number of options for you. Just choose the one that's right for you. There's no right or wrong answer, so it's what's right for you. And you'll be able to network with other professionals in different industries across the U.S. and Canada. And if you are a CEO of your company, like most of us are, you'll be able to share insight on growing and managing and running your businesses too. Speaking of which, the subject, we have a special guest today, Sharon Spano, and she has a practice where she serves folks like us, people who are CEOs of her businesses. Her husband, ironically, is also in real estate, so it was kind of a neat connection. So I thought I'd bring her on to bring some value to you and help you, not necessarily directly related to investing in real estate, but when you listen to what Sharon does, you might see and hear and feel a connection. And I'm sure she'll share with you her contact information, but it may position you later on, see how you can further leverage your business to bring in some passive income that will subsidize what you've got coming in from your practice and not put you under that stress of what happens when I want to retire. Okay, we can alleviate that. So in any case, without further ado, Sharon, welcome aboard. I'm glad you're here. I appreciate you taking your valuable time to do this too, by the way.
Delighted to be here with you today, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Excellent. Hey, if you wouldn't mind, Sharon, some people may already be familiar with who you are, but for those who don't, would you mind just giving us a quick paint a picture and let your guard down and say, just let people know who Sharon is, because I think it'll help them understand the context of what we're going to talk about today more if they understand you more personally. Is that a fair?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I have about 30 plus years, I'm amazed to say, in the field. My work is situated in adult human development. I have a PhD in human and organizational systems. So I do a lot of different things within organizations. I consider myself a business strategist. So I have a consulting practice. I also have an integral coaching practice, and I do something called systemic mapping with companies and individuals. And we can talk more about what that entails. But basically, bottom line for your listeners is I help leaders and business owners like yourself really transform how they think and adapt in the complex business environments that we're in today. And again, I do that in a variety of ways.
Excellent. Well, this is spot on. So if you wouldn't mind, you use the term systemic mapping. And I've heard of mind mapping. I've used it before and all kinds of brainstorming and great strategies for identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Would you mind describing a little bit more about what that is, and maybe give an example of how you use it? If you don't, you can maybe change the name to protect the innocent if you want. But
Sure. It's something that I've been studying and researching over the past 5 years, and now I have brought to my clients. I actually was trained in Europe and Croatia, and then here I'm certified in the United States to do this work. It's based on about 70 years of research, if you will. It's birthed out of the work of Bert Hellinger in Europe, and originally was often couched in the in the framework of adult constellations or systemic work around family constellations. What it basically does, it's a process that allows me to work with clients in a very deep way to teach them the principles of systemic thinking. And in that process, we not only learn the principles, but we actually map out a visual representation, if you will, of the systems that they're living in and working in, so they can literally begin to see and experience some of the underlying obstacles that may be sabotaging them or their success or their families or the relationships in their life. It's very exciting work. It's probably the most profound work that I've ever done, and it lends itself very well to personal and professional transformation, which is what my work is all about.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad you appreciate the explanation too, by the way. But I learned early on, I was in the corporate world for many years and rising rapidly through the ranks because I retired early as a corporate executive. And I remember one of the first things I learned was in the beginning, people would say, hey, when you're at work and you don't think about home. When you're at home, you think about home, you're at home and you don't think about work. Well, that was never the case with me. It was always, I was at home thinking about work. I was at work thinking about home. And I realized I'm one person. I may play a different role at work than I do at home, but I'm one person. The two are very interrelated. So it sounds like what you're doing, if people understand themselves more clearly at home in those relationships, that knowledge and the skills they can develop from that can easily be applied at work and maybe help people maintain that balance, which is really hard when you're a CEO. I mean, it's like we're always on demand, 24/7. So, if you wouldn't mind, maybe describe a little about how, like, what would it look like if someone, say, I contacted you, I saw you or saw you on YouTube or saw a podcast you did or listened to, excuse me, and I contacted you. What are some of the steps you would, if you don't mind sharing, that you would go through? Like, how does this actually show up in our lives?
Well, for instance, if you think about human development, what we know, Gary, is that there are 12 stages of human development. 68% of the American workforce lands in 2 of those stages, often referred to, depending on who you talk to, as the expert or achiever stage. So part of my work is working with leaders like yourself who may be a bit overwhelmed by the scaling of their businesses or in many cases, like we saw in '08, they were downsizing, and then there's issues around integrating work and the rest of their lives sometimes, or they just have a very keen understanding of systems in the general sense in terms of how to grow and develop their businesses, but maybe are not paying as close attention to the underlying or subconscious systems that maybe, as I said earlier, sabotaging their ability to take their life or their business to the next level. So leaders come to me through a variety of ways, but if we, for instance, go into a systemic mapping process, I may work with them individually with a group of people that they don't even know, so that we get kind of a level of confidentiality depending on the issue that maybe he or she wants to address. That's been a very powerful way where we look at emotional DNA or behavioral DNA. Often it's a company where you might go in and the whole team is looking at, what's blocking the many systems that we have in place. And most of the time that gets to subconscious things around just the dynamics of human ways of being in the world. So for instance, I worked with an entrepreneur, and I know you work with a lot of small business and large business owners and entrepreneurs. I worked with a woman who was having trouble scaling her business, and she couldn't quite figure out why, because she had all the nuts and bolts and systems in place in order to do that. When we did the systemic mapping process, what we saw was that there was a history in her family of people who were entrepreneurs, and every time someone went to scale their business, they wound up failing and ultimately losing the business. Mm-hmm. And so she had some subconscious blockages that were actually in her genealogy that we kind of had to unpack. And it's kind of difficult to explain because a lot of this work happens at what I'll call an energetic level. Mm-hmm. That sounds a little bit woo-woo-y. But if you think about everything that we do, there is energy between you and I right now, for instance. We are impacted by those subtle energies, and we often don't take them into consideration when we're building our businesses or hiring or even having to terminate people. So when you learn to see the world through a systemic lens, you're looking at very specific principles that kind of heighten your awareness. And my belief is when individuals develop that high level of self-awareness, not only does it impact their businesses, but their lives, and they also grow and wake up into higher levels of development.
Yeah.
I
Well,
said a mouthful, so it's because it's complicated, but did that help some?
it does. And the interesting thing is, I've had a lot of training over the years, and in the beginning it was all, if you could think of like a continuum, it started with like traditional business coaching and mentoring, and it was all the material stuff, right? And I came across a coach years ago, and I was typically been an East Coaster, he was a West Coaster, and used to work with on the old Star Wars movie. Excuse me, can't Star Wars. And any case, he was like a Zen master. You know, typical Anglo-Saxon looking guy, but he was a Zen master, and he started showing me where things were showing up on the outside because of what's going on the inside. And he's like, you know what, Gary, success is an inside job first. You develop it inside here, and in the external world will react accordingly. And so then I started getting additional coaching throughout the years. And I think a lot of the folks I work with have at least dabbled in it, if not gone into training and coaching too. So I appreciate you bringing it up, because it's everything is energetic. I mean, I'm all about the relationships and the experiences. And I realized that about myself through some of that training. I think what you're doing is a very, very applicable in today's world. And if you think about it, if people just understood more about what you're doing, I think they would take the training, receive the mentoring, and improve their personal lives as well as their business lives, because it is all very interrelated. We're not just like separate beings out there. We're all definitely connected. So sorry, I didn't mean to take up so much time and space, but this is near and dear to my heart. And
I appreciate your insight on it. And what we're really talking about, which is kind of it's becoming more mainstream in corporate America, is really a shift in consciousness, which is really just a shift in worldview. So often I get leaders who are stuck in places they don't even have awareness of because they're so busy out there achieving and creating results, and then they hit a wall. I wonder like what happened. So part of the integral coaching work is another service that I provide, in that we're really looking at who the human being is through 6 different research-based lenses, and then from there I can develop a developmental program for them that goes way far beyond just goal setting, but really helps them see themselves in a whole new way and learn to what we call witness themselves in the moment. Because if you think about what most of us go through in a day, we know we may have certain weaknesses. We're real keen often on our strengths if we're successful. But you think about, if we have a major faux pas during the day, we wind up later that evening reflecting and regretting it. And change is an interesting thing, because when you learn to witness and have the kind of awareness that I'm talking about, you learn to, at first, the practices that I design for my clients, they begin to see themselves after the fact, which is the normal way, but in a specific way. And usually there's guilt or remorse, like, oh my gosh, I went off on my coworker again today. Then we learn to witness it in the moment and kind of catch ourselves and start to self-correct. And then eventually we don't engage in those behaviors at all. And that's where the transformative component comes in, that I start to develop a completely new way of being. And the integral coaching process is like nothing else on the planet. I mean, I didn't get a PhD imagining myself to be a coach, but this fits so well with the consciousness work and the adult development work that I've been about in helping the clients that I work with achieve their highest potential, that it was like a no-brainer for me to get that certification. So it's an exciting thing, because I get to see literally leaders change how they think and behave in the world and the results that they create. It's really quite amazing.
Yeah. Well, imagine I can see the fulfillment that's showing up when you're talking, and I can see it in your face. So I'm happy for you. You discovered this about yourself, and how you can show up in the world and affect people's lives. So in that regard, if you wouldn't mind, I'm thinking, if you were talking, I'm thinking through my own life's experiences, and I want to talk about like the when is the best time, because I know people generally will probably wait until they're maybe sometimes in crisis mode and like, I need help. But if you could talk about that, and then really what would be a better time for them to reach out and seek out these services, because I think people might be able to maybe help them avoid some of the pitfalls that they might not otherwise go through. But more importantly, grow more successful. I don't mean success in all monetary terms, but being able to maintain the balance in life between personal and professional, but spiritual health, mental health, physical health, all those things. When it's all in place, everything else comes a lot more smooth. I'm starting to ramble here, but if you talk about that, I know people, like, when do they normally show up for you, and when do you think it'd be better for them to show up?
Well, I think, I get a variety and they come for different reasons at different points in time. Like I work with millennials and I love working with them because they're obviously a completely different generation. So I often get those because they're trying to figure out what's next in their life. But on the other end of the spectrum, I'll get baby boomers who are also trying to figure out what's next for this season of life. Or maybe they've, they're changing careers, so they're having to reinvent themselves and how they think about themselves in the new career or whatever. Sometimes it's people who are going through divorce. Often I'm finding that this level of work is most suited to people like yourself who are already highly successful, because those individuals have a lot of ideas, a lot of other things they want to get involved in, whether it be multiple businesses or whatever. And so particularly in that 35 to 45 range, they're still in the middle of growing careers and businesses, but then it's, they often have wife and children and or a spouse and children, and how do I manage that and still have a life? So we're not doing time management kinds of things, but we're really going deep into what's working for you in your current way of being, and what might it be closing down for you, and then how do we create a new way of being in the world? And then I design very specific practices based on the methodology. I'm talking about the coaching process now, that help them really integrate those pieces of life that they want to enrich. Because the point is, we all want a meaningful life. We want a robust life. We want to have a great career in the process. We don't want to die to work anymore. And yet the world has gotten more complex. It's more rapid. We're all being inundated by so much information. There's only so many hours in the day. So I love it, for example, when I work with a leader, as one that I'm working with now, who has been able to rethink how to be more effective at work. And then he's also at the same time really shifted how he's showing up as a dad and a husband in the world as well. And that to me is extremely enriching.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny you mentioned the technology thing. I was just thinking, I fly a lot. I mean, it seems like almost weekly now. And it used to be when I go on a flight, it was like a little couple hours of mini mental vacation, because the phone wouldn't work, the computer wouldn't work, and well, now they have Wi-Fi, and now you can text on the plane. So I was like, darn, there goes my little mini vacation.
Yeah, that used to be like my meditation time, on the planes. But I know what you're saying. I have to work a little harder now, because I am also like you. I travel quite a bit and have for years, and that was kind of my sabbatical when I was on board. But that's kind of sneaking away now, or slipping away, I should say, with all the technology. But on the other hand, if you have work to do, it's a blessing. So
yeah. Well, if you don't mind me asking, as far as I know. We've spoken a few times, and you've got some presence in Florida and some presence here in California. And as far as the people you work with, the folks you work with, are they generally U.S. Canadian based? And do you go there? Do they come see you? Is it mostly doing stuff like this online? We can do Google Hangouts and Skype calls and Zoom. And how do you what works for you as far as interacting with some of these CEOs and business owners?
Well, it's that's the beauty of today, isn't it, Gary? Because we can do so many things differently. I mean, I can think back when I first started my practice, I was in 150 cities minimum a year. And I don't necessarily desire to do that now. I go where I need to go if I have a speaking engagement or an opportunity to work with a company. But I pretty much now, the bulk of my work is in Florida. And then I do a lot of interaction with the coaching clients, at least via Zoom, like we're doing today. I'm on Zoom every day. I love Zoom very much, and because I just think it's to me, I don't even know how to talk on the phone anymore. I'm so used to these face-to-face conversations. But pretty much depends on the need of the client, because I do love to travel and I love being in other states and I love exploring other places and other people. So it's not that I don't go to those places, but I'm not booking myself the way that I used to do when I was on the speaking circuit, because I do deeper work now, and I'm in and out of places over a more extended period of time. And so it's less in the air, but only if it requires that I serve the client in that way. It's not anything that I'm against. It's just I don't need to do it as much anymore, given the work I'm doing.
Well, I imagine probably your greatest work is probably done one-on-one with the CEO, the business owner. But do you ever do group work too? Like, in other words, if you work with a chiropractor in greater Chicago metro area that maybe has 6 offices in the metroplex, that chiropractor, he or she is basically running an enterprise. I mean, they're the CEO, maybe they're the main chiropractor, and they got other chiropractors. They probably could use some guidance. So do you do group work too, or how does that? If you work with an individual like the CEO, could you eventually come up and work with the team? Because I know there's a lot of relationship dynamics that go on.
Yeah, because sometimes I'm doing strategic work. Like they may bring me in to literally help them develop their strategic plan, their vision, values, mission, all of that kind of stuff, or to help them redesign their systems and processes. So then I'm working with the whole company. I do very little with one-on-ones in terms of the integral coaching because the work is too deep. And it's over a 6-month period of time. So usually I'm working with 3 to 5 leaders at a time in that context. And then the rest is all group work.
Okay.
Depending on what the client brings me in for.
Awesome. Okay. Is there, does the level of service, it sounds like it's probably going to be somewhat customized based on the individual CEO and the business that they're running. Is that the fair statement, or do you have like a basic set of service that you provide, but it's applicable differently? I'm just trying to get a feel for. I'm pretty sure what you do is probably pretty highly customized for the individual.
Yeah, it has to be because every company is different, but there are certain things based on my training that I'm always looking for. So that's where the systemic work comes in, because the 3 principles around that are order, meaning what's the order in the organization, who's first, who's second, and so here's an example of order. We've all lived this. You're the CEO of a company, and let's say now you hire a new office manager, and she comes in and she thinks she knows more than you all of a sudden, and more than anybody else that's been there. And now she starts trying to make all these changes, and she upsets all the dynamics in the organization. So that's someone who is out of order. So that's an example of the principle of order. The second is place. What is an individual's place within the system? Sometimes it's a department, for instance, that is out of place or doesn't know their place, or maybe the budget is out of place. Sometimes we show favoritism to one department over another. So we're looking at place. So I'll get, for instance, a CEO who might, when we're actually doing the work, and I say, place, just literally show me where your CFO is, as an example. And he'll take the CFO and put him in a corner facing a wall. Well, that tells us a lot right there. And then he'll see for himself, like something that he knew at a cognitive level, but now he begins to experience it in real time, going, oh yeah, this guy's not even on my team. He's not even facing inward to the rest of the team. And then the third is balance of exchange. And so what happens when the balance of exchange is out is we start to build resentment, we lose trust, communication breaks down, now we've got conflict. And so that's where, an example of that might be when we see silos. Maybe the bulk of the budget goes to the sales department because they're the CEO's glory. I've seen this often. Yeah. The sales guys all get on the CEO's Learjet, but the production team who's actually building or making something happen, they feel slighted or ignored because, they don't even get, cans of Coke in their department or whatever. Yeah. So these are dynamics that people have some level of awareness of, but they don't know what to do about them because they're so busy doing the work of the day. And so, when I come in, my job is to look at all of these things and then help them through a variety of processes and opportunities, see what they may not really either know or know what to do about. And then we build the team from there. There's always communication issues that, I'm facing, and developmental issues as well. And often what'll happen is someone on the team will rise up as, I'll use this term, I don't really like it, but I'll say the villain.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of all know who the villain is, but what my job is to help the villain be a superstar. And if that can't happen, then there's other decisions that have to be made, usually, on the part of the leadership. But at least we all know what the playing field is and what's sabotaging us, and then we can move forward from there. Does that help a little bit to think about it?
It does, yeah. And there's so much that's ringing true for me. Even back to the part about the sales guys are always right by the CEO, and the production people are in a back room behind a locked door.
Yeah.
If you think about it, the timing of what you're doing, and you've been doing this for a while. That in the last 10 years of my corporate experience, the term chief technology officer came into being. And it was because of that dynamic you described there, because the reality is nothing happens till somebody sells something, but the person selling something's got to have something to sell, right? So, and then from the CTO, chief technology officer, came the CIO, chief information officer. So we started seeing more input from these different branches and influence. So what you're doing is I think is bringing that about. If you wouldn't mind, I know we're getting close here, but I love what you do because it's so applicable. And I know some people are thinking here, well, this is great for my big, $100 million corporation, but it's also great for the person who's at the $1 million level too, because when you hit that magic 7-figure in income, there's like a threshold. I know you see this a lot of times, Sharon, where their head bounces up against the wall and they can't, like the person you mentioned earlier, she couldn't see how she wasn't able to expand her business. The entrepreneur in her family history was every entrepreneur who tried to do that ended up crashing and burning. So this is extremely applicable because at that level, you're starting to hire 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. And all of a sudden the relationships dynamics kick in. But what's your when I don't want to say this. I know that you serve everybody equally well, but is there a certain group that you would say, boy, if you could work with that one group, all these what would develop there is all these other groups would benefit a lot more. So if you work with the $1 million producer, get them going, that would help. What you apply there would help anybody at any level. I guess what I'm looking for is that avatar, that one thing we call it.
Right. Yeah, the avatar, and this was difficult for me, Gary, because earlier in my career, I was, according to the Strengths Finder, what was known as a developer. I really spent a lot of years on the road working, with leadership, but certainly middle management. And I really believed that leadership was more about a way of being than a title, and anyone could step up to being a leader. And I still believe that. But I have found that this level of work, because of the complexity and the depth of it, is often not as readily suitable for people in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
So like, for instance, I have done work here in our community for our transportation authority, and I worked with the leadership all the way down into middle management. But when they wanted me to go down into the bus drivers, and the security team, it was a little bit harder for them to grasp the work, not because they're ignorant people, but because their mind is focused more on task orientation than, development. They just want to come in and do their job and leave, for the most part. I mean, I'm being very stereotypical. So now at this season of my life, I'm available, and I do some of that work in my community. Pro bono, because I do believe the work can impact single moms, or I'd love to do more work with our homeless community here and things of that nature to break some of the systemic ancestry type of paradigms that need to be broken, because I believe in, creating whatever I can to help for the greater good. So I do some of that via ministry work.
Oh, nice.
Pro bono work. But my avatar in terms of the clients that I work with are now more executive C-suite level or business owners. And the reason for that is I have, in my many years on the field, seen a lot of people suffer under poor leadership. And so I really believe if I can work with the guys at the top, men and women at the top, in whatever capacity that is, small or large companies, they will be better leaders, and therefore they will do more to make our nation, our world a better place. And they will cause less suffering out there in the workplace because they will literally know how to lift people up. So it's been a shift for me and a hard one because I didn't want to let go of anyone out there who might benefit from the work. But, as we know, as business owners, your marketing efforts have to be very finely tuned. And so that's been an important piece for me.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you've heard of the organization. I think it's the American Association of Women Business Owners. I think, you would certainly resonate with any group, but I'm partial. I was raised by a single mom. Both of my grandmothers went to college university. This is way back in the 20s and 30s when it was kind of rare for that to happen. And my father's mother, my great grandmother, at the turn of the last century, was widowed with 3 children and a farm. And by the time she had passed on to our Heavenly Father, she had 3 farms and multiple businesses and multiple industries that she developed and grew all on her own. This was just a time when these things just didn't happen. It was very rare. So, my wife is a professor. She's a doctor also. She's got 4 degrees in Canada, and she specializes with entrepreneurs. And one of her favorite role models was Madam C.J. Walker, who started off selling cosmetic hairbrushes and stuff to African-American women back over 100 years ago, and developed one of the first network marketing businesses in the history of the world. And there's just amazing stories. But in any case, what I'm getting at is I'd love to have you maybe do a talk with those folks. And is there anything I can do to help you share what you're doing with the rest of the world? Do you have anything you can share with people listening? A favorite book you've read, or like one thing, guys, you should do today before you do anything else? Even how do they contact you? Because I think you're resonating a lot of people. And I'll be quiet here in a second, I promise. But I have a personal interest in this, which is I want all of these folks to be able to invest off to the side in real estate, because it is a tangible asset. Nothing against the stock market, but having a tangible income producing asset that'll provide some passive income for these folks later on in life so that they can relax and be a better CEO, and also think about their transition plan for when they want to, travel around the world and not be working day by day. They got to have this income to do this. I think what you're doing positions them to be able to do that. But so if you would mind, there's 3 things. Share how people can contact you. If you got a favorite book you would suggest, and one golden nugget of wisdom that Sharon Spano has learned over the years, do you think would really impact people going forward?
Well, I appreciate that. And let me say, too, and I thank you for mentioning the women's organization, because I'm getting ready to speak this Thursday at our Orange County Corrections Department for all their women leaders. So I'm very excited about that, because there again is an example of women who are in a very difficult, complex organization, and to be able to teach them some of these principles and hopefully make their jobs easier, but maybe impact, the lives of some of their inmates, to me is just a thrilling opportunity. And so then to what you were talking about in terms of the investors and the real estate and some of that, I don't know if you're aware, but I wrote a book called The Pursuit of Time and Money, which the subtitle is Step into Radical Abundance and Discover the Secret to a Meaningful Prosperous Life. And I feel like that's a really important book for anyone looking at real estate, either as an investor or for realtors, because when you understand where you are developmentally with your experience of time and money, everything shifts. So to answer your question, they can go to SharonSpano.com, and that's SP as in Peter, ANO, all one word, SharonSpano.com, to get the book. We've got a free download of the first chapter, I believe, and there's all kinds of resources on the one page that they can access that are kind of interesting and well thought out. And then also I would invite people to listen to my podcast, The Other Side of Potential. I can't wait to have you on there, because again, we're exploring how high-level leaders such as yourself really integrate their quest for prosperity with a desire for a meaningful life as well. So we've had some great great leaders on there, and any of your listeners that might be interested, I'm always looking for future people to interview that can share their perspective on complexity in business, and it's just a great opportunity for us to have a great discussion.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think I've got a few people I can come up with that I would recommend too, and I appreciate the opportunity to return a favor and help your folks out too. So, I really, I think I'm speaking for a lot of people, Sharon. I thank you for sharing what you just shared, because it really, this is all kind of unscripted and speak from the heart. And I think it came out loud and clear. And I get this at Zoom, so I get to see your wonderful shining face and your light shining, and it's just your passion shows through. And I know people on the podcast won't be able to see that, but I think they'll be able to hear it. And so I really do appreciate you taking your valuable time to share with some of my folks. And I look forward to returning the favor also. And in the meantime, everybody listening, again, stay tuned. Go to iHeartTunes, iTunes, Stitcher. There's 75 different platforms you can subscribe to this podcast and Sharon's podcast too, The Other Side of Potential. Also, make sure you look for the book. You go to Sharon's website, SharonSpano.com. Look for the book, At Pursuit of Time and Money. And I'll make sure, Sharon, I'm pretty sure this will be in the podcast notes. But for those of you listening to this and you really like what you're hearing, man, go to myinvestmentservices.com, and sign up. Be a member. It's easy. There's different levels of involvement. Just stick your toes in the water for now and get a feel for what it's like, because we're all in this together. We're individual, but we're also very much connected. And if we can share each other in multiple levels, it absolutely is win-win. Everybody wins. And for the most part, you'll see we get together 4 times a year for 3 days. It's high-minded, high-level, extremely positive. When you leave, you're not the same person you were when you got there, and it has a lot of it to do with what Sharon's been sharing today. So thanks again, Sharon. I appreciate
Thank you so much, Gary. I appreciate the opportunity. It was great having the conversation with you. I look forward to doing it again.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Real Estate Investing for Professional Men and Women. Be sure to go to myinvestmentservices.com to join our community and start building wealth today.